where we find the most interesting things is in the crawl spaces, because sometimes no one's been down there for maybe decades, you know, and so we find lots of skeletons.
Hey, it's James Bausch. Today we're sitting down with Rod from Brick and Beam. Rod and I have been working together for a number of years and been a valuable asset to our clients as they look to have home inspections done. And it's about time that we sit down together and have a conversation and share with you a little bit more about Rod and his team and Brick and Beam and kind of what their services are. And so thank you for getting together. Appreciate it very much. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little about Brick and Beam, if you would. How long you've been doing this?
Yeah. So I've been an inspector for, I guess, 8 years, close to 8 years. I was in maintenance and construction for probably 30-ish years prior to becoming a home inspector in 2015. That experience was really valuable for me to, you know, gain the skills and the knowledge that I'm now helping to, you know, assist in my role as a home inspector. So it's been about 8 years. My son Jacob joined our company in 2018, so he's been with me after about, I did for about 3 years prior to him joining me, so just two of us.
So you were in maintenance and construction for a number of years before you got into it. What made you get into it, number one? And number two, what do you most enjoy about it?
Yeah, it was an opportunity that came up. I enjoyed what I did, but as I aged, it was just something that I saw as being a second career and would be a good opportunity to, you know, use the skills and the knowledge that I'd already accumulated and do something that would, first of all, I could work independently, work for myself and be self-employed, which I have really enjoyed. That's been a big bonus. Got the second question.
What's one thing that you really enjoy about it?
Oh yeah, what do I really enjoy? Probably the thing that I enjoy the most is explaining to clients what the issues are. And a lot of times, both myself and Jacob, we're pretty good at like talking about the fixes as well. Now we don't always, you know, have all the knowledge, but we like to say, well, here's what we've done in the past, or here's a thought or how you might be able to address a certain issue. And that, I feel like, helps to put their mind at ease a little bit, you know, so that they're not like, oh, this is a big deal. This is a huge thing to say, no, this is a $15 GFI receptacle. And just, if you want to, you can even read the instructions on the back and probably do it yourself, you know, or at least get someone handy to do it. So
that's one of the things I really appreciate working with you guys. You don't make mountains out of molehills, so to speak, but also, you know, obviously point out the big issues and kind of help be a judge in terms of like how severe something is. I'm sure. Really appreciate it. For someone who's never had an inspection done before, never worked with an inspector, help us understand kind of the process briefly from very first phone call when they call you and say, hey, we'd like an inspection at 123 Main Street, to the very end when you kind of step out of the picture. What is your role? What does that process look like?
Yeah, so clients generally call us directly. Sometimes we get orders through the agent, and either way is fine, but we take care of all the scheduling with the listing agent. If there's additional things that they need, like water testing or radon testing, whatever, we can get all of those scheduled as well. So we'll take care of all of that. Then we, of course, work with the buyer's schedule and try to pick a day and a time that works for them. Our preference is to do the inspection first and then have the client come like for the last 30 minutes. And basically we take that time to go through a verbal overview with the client, explain what we've seen, what issues are there, and just like I was talking about before, just kind of help them understand what's going on. And there's always some things. We always find issues with every house, so no surprise there. But yeah, and then usually that evening, a lot of times, or at least within 24 hours, our company always tries to get our reports out within 24 hours. They'll receive a full report with the photos that we've taken, all the issues that we've talked about, and then basically at that point, it becomes the agent's role to take that information and respond accordingly. We don't like to, I don't like to tell them, oh, you need to ask for this to be fixed. That's not my role. My role is to just do the inspection, find the concerns, and help them to understand what those concerns are. And then basically then we're done. So
very well. So you mentioned obviously kind of what we call the whole house inspection, but then also radon and water. What other services do you provide? And then what things are kind of outside of your scope that you would recommend, they need to talk to someone else about?
Yeah. So obviously our primary service is home inspections, almost always through a real estate transaction. Once in a while, we might have a concerned homeowner that just wants to have their home looked at for whatever reason. We're happy to do those as well. But yeah, so home inspection, we're both, Jacob and myself are licensed as state certified pest inspectors for wood destroying insects. So we do those ourselves. We do our own radon testing. We provide water testing for whatever water test requirements are required generally by the lenders. We also do mold testing. So those are all additional services that we provide. And we're happy to provide those as well as a home inspection. Some of those services that like the lab testing takes a little bit longer. So even after the inspection's done, you may not get those reports for, 3 to 5 days sometimes, but we do our best to stay within the time frame that our buyers need. So,
and are there any tests or services that you don't provide when it comes to home inspections?
Well, there's a number of things that I would say are outside the scope of a home inspection. We check appliances generally, but just basic function. And sometimes that gets a little sticky because we can say, yeah, the dishwasher worked. Okay. Well, maybe not every cycle on the dishwasher worked, or maybe the time delay doesn't work. I mean, we really can't do an exhaustive inspection on those types of items. Obviously things that are concealed defects, and that can get difficult as well because no one's happy when you find a defect after you've moved into the house. But we do our best. Our company is known for being thorough. We try to be just as thorough as we can be. But anything that's not visible is outside the scope of the inspection.
Okay, very well. How long does a home inspection typically take? If you're a homeowner, how long can I expect the inspector to be there?
Yeah, so we schedule for a 4-hour block of time on almost all houses. Once in a while, we'll get a really big one that might be more, but in 4 hours, we can typically get through the inspection process in 2.5 to 3 hours, and then that last hour, we schedule for the client to come and do the verbal overview. So it's kind of a long process, and for sellers, sometimes they don't realize how long it is, that we really are going to probably take that full 4 hours. So it's good to understand that.
What are some of the most common issues that you see come up consistently? Not every house, but most houses, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, I was thinking about that one. Probably the biggest thing that I'd have to say number one is exterior drainage. And it's so simple, but I feel like I'm a broken record in talking to my clients. It's like, get your downspouts extended away from the foundation. It's just such a simple thing, but you don't realize how much of that saturation brings water into your basement, cause for wet basements, wet crawl spaces. Really, water's just probably the number one enemy of your house. And so I would say that is probably number one as far as the issue that we see over and over is just getting your downspouts extended. Yeah.
Other than that, or from your experience being in construction and maintenance, and then now as an inspector, are there other things that a homeowner can kind of stay on top of, the good routine maintenance things to kind of put on their schedule to make sure they're checking on a regular basis?
Yeah, just routine maintenance I think is important. We do a lot of HVAC units, furnaces that obviously have not been touched for a decade, and just to, having those serviced is important. Changing furnace filters is something that needs to be done every 2 to 3 months, depending on the type of filter that you have. Filters on, canister filters for the sediment, for well pumps, that's important as well. You start to get diminished flow. So I would say just good routine maintenance on those components is really important and something that we see lacking in a lot of homes.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Are you able to give kind of a general price range? I mean, obviously every house is different. There's different sizes. Someone may just opt to do a whole house inspection. Someone may the whole gamut of things. But can you give a general ballpark of pricing?
Yeah,
like
generally our inspections are right in the $400 to $500 range for most houses. So I would say that's kind of our range for the home inspection itself. The additional services vary in cost depending on what you choose to do, and then sometimes if a client chooses to do everything, basically we try to discount that cost of those inspections as well.
You've had the opportunity to work with hundreds and hundreds of buyers and do a lot of inspections and meet with buyers there at the property, show them your report and your findings. Can you give us a couple recommendations to a buyer, some tips, recommendations, so that they can make the best use of really your services they're hiring you for, and make sure they're getting their bang out of their investment with you?
Yeah, in terms of the buyers, probably the biggest thing is understanding that overview time is time that you need to dedicate to being attentive to what the inspector has to say and not have distractions. We have a lot of clients that have young children, and we love that, but the time to be chasing your kids is not when you're trying to listen to the inspector's overview. So avoiding those distractions, having that kind of focused mindset when you get to the house for the overview is really important. I think the other thing that a lot of people think of that inspection as kind of like a second showing is they're going to bring aunts and uncles and everybody who hasn't seen the house. Well, that just becomes more of a distraction as well, because everyone's kind of running around the house and they're not focused on the overview and trying to understand the value of the inspection and what the inspector just saw for the last 2.5, 3 hours.
Yeah. And if they aren't focused, then when you hand the baton back to me, it can be difficult, because now we may not be able to really focus in on what the major issues are and how to negotiate that. So that's a really good tip. And
I would say this as well as being attentive during that overview, is read your report thoroughly. We run across this from time to time, where we get a call back and they say, hey, this is not right. And we'll go back, really? Okay. So we look back in our reports like, oh, it's right here. It was clearly stated. There's a photo, even there's a circle, it's like, I don't know what more, we can do. So yeah, just read that report and make sure you understand.
That's very good. What about from a seller's standpoint? I mean, obviously you're hired by the buyer in most cases, but what advice, recommendations, expectations can you set up for a seller so they can be prepared for when you come?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things with sellers is just clearing, making access to the components that the inspector needs to get to, and access to a crawl space. If it's in a closet, you're going to need to clean out that closet. We really don't like moving your personal belongings, and sometimes we'll refuse to, depending on how much and what items are there. So having those areas cleared, having clear access to the electrical panel, the furnace, just all of the components of the house. Attic access is another one. Those are very often in a closet and above a shelf, and we try our best to be Houdinis, get into everything that we can, but we don't want to move your personal belongings. So I would say that's probably the biggest thing. And then secondly, with sellers is, while we appreciate you telling us about the house and the components and what you've done and all of that, you don't really need to follow us around and explain everything to us. We've been around the block a few times, and we kind of know what we're looking at, generally speaking. So sometimes that can get a little overbearing.
Sure, fair enough.
So
let me ask you this, kind of a little more lighthearted maybe. Yeah. What are some of the funniest or most unique things that you and Jacob have come across as you've done inspections?
We've seen a lot of crazy stuff that, handyman type stuff, but I guess where we find the most interesting things is in the crawl spaces, because sometimes no one's been down there for maybe decades, and so we find lots of skeletons. All of those so far have been animal skeletons, thankfully. But we find things like that: snakes, lizards, salamanders, frogs, raccoons, lots of crazy stuff. So you got to be somewhat brave when you go into those spaces and kind of be prepared for anything. So
I'm sure enough.
yeah.
Let me throw a little curveball at you. We didn't talk about this, but if I'm a buyer looking to have a home inspection done, and there's several companies out there, how should I make my decision on what company to work with? What should I be looking for?
I would say you need to be comfortable with your decision and what inspection company that you choose. We pride ourselves on, like, for myself, the experience that I have that I'm bringing to the table, not only the fact that I've passed the state requirements and got my licensing and all that, but I had 30 years of experience prior. I built my own home. I've remodeled numerous homes. I wouldn't say I've done it all, because that wouldn't be true, but I've done a lot.
Yeah.
So that's a strength of our company. My son Jacob as well has remodeled several homes himself and basically grew up with me. So I had him doing a lot of stuff helping me. So that's a strength of our company. Just being willing to take the time, I think, as well. And I can't speak for other companies because I've not been to their overviews, but we do really try to take the time that's necessary. If it requires an hour overview, an hour discussion, and there's things that the buyer doesn't understand that we need to take extra time to explain, we'll do that. I mean, we're limited on how long we've scheduled the inspection, so we need to be out by the end of that scheduled time, but we really try to take as much time as needed to give them every, penny of value to their inspection fee. Yeah.
So if I hear you right, I don't know about words in your mouth, but not only someone who has just passed the state minimum requirements, but someone who has a history and experience, longevity, not only in the business, but also prior maybe, and then someone who's going to be an educator. Through the process.
I think that's a good word. An educator is somebody that is going to explain. We have clients that are very well versed in the trades, maybe a particular trade, and it's kind of fun sometimes with them because we can speak the language. Yeah. But I would say most of our clients are, maybe it's their first home buying experience. Maybe they've been through it before, but they didn't hire an inspector on the last house. It just really varies. But yeah, having that experience, I think, is key and something that we kind of pride ourselves as being a strength.
Anything else that you can add that as we've kind of been talking here for a few minutes that, we didn't cover that might be helpful for someone who's considering a home inspection?
Yeah, I would say, the value of an inspection is really, I tell some people that I think we're going to get your money back in terms of like the issues that we find. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I would feel like most sellers are probably willing to negotiate a little bit of money. And when I say a little bit, I'm talking maybe, I don't know, $1,500. It seems reasonable, so if your inspection fee is $500 and you can get a return on investment of a credit toward a repair or have them repair something. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I think it's money well spent. Yeah. I know not every home requires a home inspection because maybe there's not issues there, but every home is going to have some defects. It's just how many and how expensive they're going to be. So I feel like the value of the home inspection is something that a potential buyer should seriously consider. You're making a huge investment with what you're purchasing, for a home. And so, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. If someone wants to get a hold of you, reach out to you, whether ask questions, follow up on this, or to schedule a home inspection, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so my number, the company number, 260-229-0928. You can also reach my wife, Lisa, who does most of our scheduling. Her number, 260-229-0925. So just one difference in the last number there. We also have a website, www.brickandbeaminspections.com. We have a web form on there where you can basically fill out your information and order an inspection through the website, or at least give us the information. That's not necessarily ordering it, but we'll contact you then after that and discuss the options, with additional services and things like that. So those are the two primary means to get a hold of us. And yeah, we'd love to provide the inspection services if that's something you choose to have us do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been really helpful for me, and I'm sure for many other people as well. So appreciate your time today.
All right.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.